Hola, esta es mi mamá.
Hola, mi nombre es María y vamos a hacer unas ricas picaditas veracruzanas. Los ingredientes son para la salsa unos jitomates rojos, unos chiles, vamos a ocupar queso, la masa y un pedacito de carne de cecina de res. Poner los jitomates a asar y los chiles para la salsa.
Poner agua a la masa.
Sí, se le pone agua a la masa para que esté suave, para cuando hagamos las picaditas no esté dura y se puedan
Now we're just gonna put the cooked tomatoes in the blender and the chilies too. And we're gonna add a clove of garlic in there too. And you're gonna sprinkle this much salt in the blender. Terminas de licuar, lo pones en un traste y así se tiene que mirar la salsa.
Vamos a hacer las picaditas. Se agarra una bolita y tenemos estas hojitas para que dé vuelta la tortilla. Se pone aquí y se empieza a girar hasta que se hace grandecita la tortilla para hacer las picaditas.
And you can make those paper circles from a plastic bag. That the tortilla should look like this. Dejas cocinar por 5 minutos cada lado de la tortilla. So as my mom finishes up cooking the tortillas and getting all the ingredients for the next step of the recipe, I will be answering some questions in this portion of the video. So for the first question, I do believe that communities maintain their traditional meals and culture memories after watching the video on Thursday. And my parents came to the US, it's been like around 25 years, and my family still continues to prepare meals that they would eat in Mexico, and they carefully follow the recipes to ensure that the measurements are correct so it tastes good. And a lot of people in my neighborhood are Mexicans, so what they do is they prepare a meal and they tend to sell it to local residents, or they go from community to community to sell. The picada recipes reminds me of some pretty good memories when I used to walk home from a program I was attending from 1 to 5, and I can still picture my mom cooking while the TV was on and a novela was usually playing in the background, or the Rosa de Guadalupe was playing in the background, and I would just sit down and watch it while I waited for the food to come out. This recipe also reminds me of my aunts from Mexico who used to make this for me when I visited Mexico because they knew I was familiar with the taste of this dish and because they knew it reminded me of my mom's cooking and I was feeling homesick during that time. The only thing that this recipe reveals about my family's past is that they were too poor to prepare fancy meals or any other type of meals at that time. My mom came from a family of 7. That includes my grandma and grandpa. So therefore, my grandma wanted something really quick, easy, and it was cheap. My grandma used to cook this meal very frequently. So when my mom moved to the US, she had that recipe in her head. She didn't need to ask for it. So when I was born, she would make that pretty frequently, which I wouldn't mind because it was really simple and easy and quick, and I knew she would come home from work really exhausted. My mom doesn't really have to ask for the recipe as she has the recipe engraved in her brain because of how often my grandma would make it, but the people that would ask the recipe would be my mom's sister. They would ask my mom for the recipe, and the recipe doesn't really ever change. The method for making and preparing it remains the same, but if you add different kinds of cheese, it does change the flavor of the meal. To answer the following question, there's no further family history that should be known about this dish, except from what I have already stated. And to answer the last question, this week's video made me think of something I could compare to the food my family makes. Many Americans might not think of the picadas as food just because it might contain beans, cheese, or salsa and tortilla. And others might think it's not clean because a Mexican came up with the recipe and because a Mexican's creating the dish. As we can compare in the video. Many Americans thought that Chinese food was not clean because Chinese people made it, but things would be different if an American person would make the Chinese food, then they would eat it. Another thing I concluded from the video is that a large portion of the Chinese population that obtains restaurants tend to get recipes from those who are older, such as aunts and grandmas, grandpas, to be able to keep the traditions and taste within their restaurant, and to be able to share that with their customers. As comparing to my family wants the recipes to be able to keep these traditions alive and to get that unique taste that they know, and they want to be able to share that with me and the rest of the other family that they might have here. Thank you. This, when it's ready, you take it out, and my mom's gonna do something. Freshly out, my mom does this.
Ya que esté lista para picarle los alrededores, los borditos. Y en medio también. Tiene que quedar así.
Para las picadas nos gusta usar el queso fresco, pero puedes usar cualquier queso que quieras. Put a little bit of oil on each tortilla. Put the oil just so it tastes better. And then you put the sauce on top of that. I like them with beans. We already had prepared the beans before. You just put it on the tortillas. So you can do sauce or beans.
Por último se les pone su quesito arriba y se dejan por unos 5 minutos a fuego lento. Se le pone su queso y ya quedan así listos. Se pone un pedacito de cecina para acompañar las picaditas.
But this is optional.
Se acompaña con el pedazo de cecina y también puedes ponerle, si te gusta el aguacate, puedes ponerle un pedacito de aguacate.